When Ryan's when it's time to begin, it's on the Rewind to Raw with John Pollock and waiting the 18. That makes sense that these things we see in the ring every week on TV. It's Rewind to Raw for Monday night. Download it Tuesday morning from the Post Wrestling site. It's Rewind to Raw for Monday night on USA Now on the John and Wade Take the Mic.
Welcome everybody to Rewind a Raw. My name is Wade Ting, and at least for a couple more episodes, our I don't know, what do you call this? Like our showcase, perhaps, of several guest hosts in lieu of John Pollock's absence will continue. And as we had last week, I'm very pleased to be joined again by Nate Milton. Nate, how are you doing?
I'm doing good, Brother Ting. I'm ready for Raw this week. I'm filled up. I'm fueled by tryptophan waiting, which we might talk about here in a second. But I am ready to get to this review, my brother.
Your Monday night experience sounded well. First of all, how was your Thanksgiving? Yeah, let's talk about that.
Oh, Thanksgiving was good this year. It was different, obviously, as I'm sure it was for most of the American listeners out there, in that, you know, it was a smaller gathering this year, basically just myself, my parents, my sister, and my nieces. And, you know, we tried to make it as normal as possible, you know, and, you know, it's different, but I think the important things are, you know, food, family, and fellowship. Like, if you got those three things working, regardless of everything else, then, you know, it's a good day, because as I mentioned on Twitter, like, there are a lot of people that didn't even wake up to see Thursday coming through this year. So the fact that, you know, it's not perfect, it's not ideal, but the fact that a lot of us were able to have some kind of semblance of a Thanksgiving, like, that's a blessing in 2020.
The positivity and the optimism, I think, is exactly what people need on a Monday. So thank you for that, Nate.
Hold on real quick, Wade. Let me tell you what wasn't positive, though. And this is something that we might, you know, I hope somewhere Andrew Thompson is listening, because I want to pass this along to the younger generation. Like, your hatred and your cynicism, that's not needed, fam. Because here's what happened, Wade Ting. I sent out a tweet on Thanksgiving morning because I was watching the Macy's parade. And Hamilton did their little presentation, and I was like, oh, that was cool. You know, I like when that music hit. And I don't know what happened, Wade. Maybe it's the Ham fam, the Hamilton fandom out there. But that was the biggest tweet I ever tweeted. You know, I had like 15,000 likes or whatever. I don't even know the numbers, but it was like maybe 1,500. Like, they was on that tweet wave. And so I told my niece, I was like, look at this, like, I'm doing these numbers on Hamilton. And she looked at me, Wade Ting. She didn't give me a pat on the back. She didn't say, that's great, Uncle Nate. She said, okay, but what's your IG numbers looking like? And so what I want to say to the young people out there is, you got to embrace these small victories in life and stop being so cynical all the time. Because, yes, I was like, okay, we're not talking about Instagram right now. We're talking about this Hamilton tweet.
It means nothing to the younger generation if it's not on Instagram, it sounds like. But you're not kidding, Nate, because your tweet about Hamilton, which is essentially just, it's a GIF of...
Yeah, that's all it is.
I forget, Aaron Burr.
Yep.
Dancing and saying, me when that beat for the Schuler sisters dropped. This thing has 111 retweets and 1,500 likes. So you're a big deal, not just with the Macy's Day Parade, but with Hamilton. So congratulations to you. A big weekend, Nate. But you alluded to it earlier. We have another American joining us on the line. And of course, right now, I want to bring in Andrew Thompson. Andrew, how was your Thanksgiving? Was it as exciting as Nate's?
Hold on. I just want to know how I get looped in when Nate needs disrespecting him. That's just what I want to know. Come on, Nate.
I'm just trying to say, Andrew, the younger generation, like your age bracket, like the kids that grew up watching Planet 51 with The Rock. Like, yeah, sometimes y'all a little too cynical out here, my brother.
What's good, Nate? What's good, Wade? How y'all feeling, man?
Good to talk to you again, brother.
It's always good, man. Always a pleasure. How you doing, Wade?
I'm doing not bad. You tell me, man. Like, do people not respect Twitter numbers as much as Instagram numbers these days?
I have no clue. I couldn't tell you, man. I couldn't tell you. But
Andrew too busy writing news stories to be worried about these numbers.
but wait, Nate. What I can tell you guys about is the news that
Oh,
yeah, that
okay,
lovely
okay.
segue.
Did you guys get the chance to see Liv Morgan's documentary that came out over the weekend, or catch a snippet of it?
Watched it today. It was wonderful.
Ooh,
Yeah,
okay. I haven't had a chance to check it out yet.
It's solid, Nate. It's solid. It's some positives in there, and it's like some glaring negatives as well that people kind of pointed out. Let me start with the positives, of course. Like, of course, Liv, she had a great story. I'm going to describe it as like a very rough upbringing, but you could categorize that however you may. She had some rough times growing up, and she chased her dream. She made it happen. She got a lot of fans backstage. I think that's obvious. Like Paul Heyman, Sami Zayn, Bayley, Dakota Kai, Ember Moon, very well liked by her colleagues, and is very obvious. And WWE, I think we all can agree that WWE they real hit or miss with a lot of stuff, but like they don't miss with these documentaries. Like none of them. They always hit with the documentaries. But like one of the big takeaways that people kind of pointed out was WWE kind of I would say missing the mark with Liv Morgan, and I guess the opportunities they could have slotted her in. And like one of the things, like it's just like the mix ups and creative. It seems like I'm sure you saw the part when she was her and Ember Moon was supposed to have a match, and it got canceled like 30 seconds before they go out. But then it later got explained that the reason they got pulled because Vince McMahon didn't want her to be in her final form in a dark match, which I think made sense. But another one was like she was on the road for like 5 or 6 months. Like they had her renting out cars, renting out hotels just to come to the show and not do anything. You know what I'm saying? And then she didn't know if she was doing anything. That's why she kept coming to the show. So it was just like little stuff like that people kind of pointed out. And it was like overall, of course, like just speaking on the documentary, like it was a great documentary. But like I just wondering you guys' thoughts on just talents really not knowing what they're doing. I mean, we've heard that plenty of time. I don't think that's nothing new as far as that, but like just to like actually see it in that type of form was different.
It was a story of several false starts, and when they announced that there was a Liv Morgan, TV special, I mean, it was a 48 minute something documentary. When they announced it, I was like, man, what are they going to do that documentary on? Like, what has she done over the past year? But like, that's what made the documentary so interesting. This is the story of the year plus of a talent who has just been fucked around in this system. Like, she's been perfectly healthy the entire time. Created a great bond with this group called the Riot Squad. They were broken up for no reason at all, no payoff with the split. And then she was brought to SmackDown, not used for several months. Had a match with Charlotte Flair and then was never seen from again. Another false start before getting drafted to Raw, where they apparently had some plans for her, but that never came to fruition. And then the whole lesbian angle, which Paul Heyman was like so ecstatic about. He's like, whoa, they did great. You couldn't have asked for a better job from them. I have to disagree. That was a terrible angle. And of course that was dropped too. So, I mean, it was like incredibly frustrating for her, because she's somebody who we've seen go through this entire thing. And the fact that they actually had a documentary crew following her around, obviously at the beginning, with high hopes that they would, be following somebody who probably would be a future champion at some point. Instead, they ended up documenting, the weird kind of year plus of one of many talents in that system who just kind of get lost.
I agree with Andrew Way in the fact that, like, regardless of what you think about the WWE overall, when it comes to producing these documentaries or these feature pieces, like, the production team is always on point. So I'm actually going to, take some time this week, which this is a sentence I didn't think I was going to say this week, Wei Ting. I'm going to take an hour out of my week to watch this Liv Morgan documentary. And I think just by hearing you guys describe it, like, this is not an experience that is unique to just Liv. Like, there's stories up and down the roster, in NXT, on the main roster, of people that are talented, but for whatever reason, things just haven't quite clicked. So I'm looking forward to watching this. And maybe, Andrew Thompson, like, what would be a real Christmas present for me is if they did one of these chronicles or one of these 24/7s or one of these documentaries on Tino Sabatelli, because I think that's the story that the people need out here.
No, you want to know what's crazy, Nate? Like, I know, like, I know people when they hear that, they probably think Nate joking, but like, Tino had like a crazy story. Like he had he had a surgery, and then like I guess like they had like the chip or something that they used to like take out certain stuff, and one of the things fell inside his arm, dude. Like, and then like he had to like have a whole nother couple of surgeries after that, like just because of that one mishap. Like he's had like a rough little stint.
Like I know, yeah, like people think I'm joking, Andrew, and I'm halfway joking, but like there's an interesting story there. This dude that was a pretty solid NFL player,
yeah,
and making that transition, and what happens when things don't go right. Like there's a story in there that you could tell.
Yeah, no lie. You go ahead, Way.
Well, first of all, like much of the story was told in this Dan Matha interview podcast that he did about 7 months ago, which actually, Andrew, if you just Google it, Andrew has plenty an article about it. But, I was going to say,
nice plug, Way.
Well, thank you. But I mean, like the next chapter in Tino Sabatella's story, I think will continue to be really interesting. After a weird stint, I would say, in AEW, and then perhaps back, maybe in the future in the WWE, maybe not.
And one last thing on the Liv documentary, I was always like curious, and when you mentioned the Paul Heyman, giving like pitching her the idea, I'm curious to how he pitched that to all parties involved, because I know he told Miro, he said that during the Chris Van Vliet interview that Paul Heyman told him that this storyline could possibly headline at WrestleMania, and he believed him. So, so I'm just curious as to what Heyman told Lana and Bobby Lashley, because we know what he told Liv and Miro.
I have no idea, man. Jeez, that was such a weird time, and I can't believe that was all this year. Like,
that's crazy.
Yeah,
crazy.
Feels like forever ago. I mean, I don't know. I'm definitely sure that would make a worst of show. I have no doubt about it. Man, but this year is just looking back at wrestling. This year is just going to be such a weird process. I don't even know how that'll go.
And speaking of weird, I think this is going to be a conversation that we're going to do quite a little deep dive on. Ladies and gentlemen, over the weekend, everybody knows Bruce Prichard. He's the executive director of Monday Night Raw and Friday Night SmackDown. The latest episode of his podcast covered the 2005 Survivor Series pay-per-view. Now, as you all may remember, that was the pay-per-view where Vince McMahon decided that he wanted to drop the N-word. Basically Prichard was asked about it, and kudos to Conrad Thompson for kind of pressing him on the issue to get him to speak about it. And basically Prichard's response was it doesn't hold up well, and it was a different time, different mentality, and people thought differently back then. And Nate, I wanted to kind of let you take the reins on this thing, like hearing Prichard like basically he didn't really like he addressed it, but he didn't really. He kind of danced around. I mean, and then him being a current WWE employee, like he ain't gonna say nothing bad about it. Like I wasn't expecting that listening to it, but like hearing him instead of just coming out and just denouncing it completely, it was wrong. Instead of kind of tiptoeing around the whole, it was a different place, different time. Like, do you think that he could have worded that better, or like was he just in a weird position as far as him being at the level he is in WWE? And do you kind of see a similarity into what he said versus how AJ Styles responded when he got called out by CM Punk for not speaking out about racial issues when asked about it in an interview?
Well, first of all, shout out to Brother Conrad for asking the question or pressing Bruce on the question, because I love Conrad, but I don't think that's a question he would have asked maybe a year or so ago. So maybe working with the good folks over at Wrestling with Stereotypes, like maybe that has kind of broadened that brother's horizons. And so I think this is different though when you bring up what happened with AJ Styles and CM Punk, Andrew. So I'll speak first to this particular incident. And even at the time, like even back watching it at the time, it didn't make any sense. Like for one, like that shouldn't be a word used on a wrestling program. But the caveat to that is, and it's kind of how I felt about the Booker T Triple H feud way. Like if you're going to use that word or use sentiments like that on your program, it has to pay off with something. It has to mean something. It can't just be a throwaway joke, which is what this Vince McMahon thing ended up being. And so like I've never liked that use of the word, like not like I'm out here with my top 5 favorite uses of the N-word in media. I don't have that list, folks. I can't even think of them off the top of my head. But I do feel like Yeah, like Bruce isn't going to say anything about it. And as much as I would have liked to hear him, kind of condemn it, he's not going to mess up the bag. And I don't like, I kind of understand where he's coming from, because if I were in that position, first of all, I probably wouldn't even be in that position for reasons that we're not even going to get into, Andrew Thompson. But if I was in that position, I probably would dance around the issue as well, because I don't want to mess up my good gig here with the WWE. But then real quick on the AJ Styles thing, my issue with AJ not, speaking up, when everybody was talking about Black Lives Matter in the aftermath of George Floyd's murder is, like, if you don't want to say anything, then that's fine. Just be quiet. Don't say anything. But if you are publicly called out by a colleague, like, I think then the onus is on you to at least clarify your position, clarify your stance. And so, that was my big issue with AJ. Like, if you don't want to talk about it, fine. Just enjoy your little piece of the world, which is probably flat. Just enjoy that. But if somebody directly asks you about it, then like, I think you owe it to the people to say, like, this is my position, either yay or nay, and this is how I feel about it.
Yeah, as far as like Bruce Prichard's comment, I haven't listened to the interview, so I'm only going by what your transcription, Andrew. So let me just state that off the bat. But it seems like he seemed to say that, okay, so according to your transcription, you sit there and you watch some of the things on television of men. This is referring, I suppose, to like other things. This is him referring to the Alfred Hitchcock Hour.
Yeah.
He says, so he's watching reruns of an old show, basically. And he says, you sit there and you watch some of the things on television of men just basically slapping the shit out of women back and forth as if it was just another day at the office. And it's just, time has a way of making things cringeworthy. I don't know when the Alfred Hitchcock show would have aired. Okay, I'm going to Google that right now. Alfred Hitchcock Hour. I mean, whenever it would have been, that would have been unacceptable. Okay, 1962. This scene was aired in 2005. So I don't know what world like he was referring to, where in 2005 that was a good idea, but suddenly 15 years later it's not. It was not a good idea in 2005. I don't think it would have been a good idea in 1985, 1975. So again, I totally understand what your justifications to. The man works for this guy. It's not. I don't really go to like something to wrestle for necessarily like neutral, unbiased perspective on like WWE. It's more so really interesting stories about like how they produce the shows. He's sort of in an uncomfortable situation, and short of like completely condemning it and doing something completely unlikely for somebody who's a current employee, I think I don't think I would have been happy with any explanation.
Yeah, I definitely think I can. Well, no, I'm not even gonna say I understand, because I'm not even gonna try to. But but like it's just like one of those things where like he like really tiptoed around, and I don't think it would have been no issue for him to just come out and just say I don't agree with that. But at the same time, it's like he worked for the man and very close with him, so he's not gonna say anything bad about Vince, and he ain't gonna mess up that money. And then at that, I don't think he can talk about the current product on the podcast. I think that's like something that he can't do completely. So I wouldn't expect that anyway from one Bruce Prichard. But more on a positive note, folks. We of course we got some positive topics. The good man Leon Ruff and Aja Smith got married today, and this is a great story because back in March, Leon Ruff was doing extra work for WWE, bunch of extra work. The man got signed, won the North American title, got a spot on the TakeOver card this weekend, and now this man is engaged. All of this happened in the span of like 8 or 9 months. What a hell of a year for Leon Ruff, Wade, and Nate.
Completely, 100%. It's like one thing after another. I mean, I go from not hearing about this guy in the news at all to him winning the championship, him getting engaged, and most importantly, being the fourth member of my Survivor Series team.
I don't know why I brought this up.
The Kennel from Hell. I mean,
you walked right into that, Andrew.
I don't know why I said that. Should have chosen another news item, man.
No, but great news for the both of them.
Yeah, like it's always good to hear stories like this, Andrew, particularly in this year where most of the news that you hear, whether it's wrestling related or whether it's out in the world of politics or dealing with this virus, like most of the news has been negative. So like I've been very proud of this young brother, and like honestly, like I know it's a comedy gimmick, but he's added so much more interest to that North American title chase for me. And so, yeah, I think I'm looking forward to seeing how they pay off the match at TakeOver. And yeah, congratulations to him and AJ. Like that's a great story. Here
we go. And lastly, before we wrap it up for the news segment, we got the NXT and AEW ratings were in from last week's pre-Thanksgiving show. NXT outdrew AEW in a very, 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 very close race, 712,000 to 710,000 on the viewership front. AEW won the demos that night. Just a quick guess for you guys, like who you think is going to walk away with the ratings this week. Both got big shows. AEW has their Winter is Coming show with Kenny Omega and Jon Moxley for the AEW World Title. That's headline. And then NXT is this is their go home show for TakeOver War Games. So which show do you guys think? Just a quick guess on the top of your heads. Which show do you think might outdraw the other this week?
Oh, there's no question to me that it's probably going to be AEW. I mean, even though NXT is leading up to a War Games like pay-per-view special, AEW is presenting this episode of Dynamite as if it is a pay-per-view special, headline with the biggest match that they've ever had on free television. So I think it would be a disappointment if this, to me, didn't hit. Even if it hits 900,000, I think it would be a disappointment. Like that to me is like the more interesting kind of like predicting game. Like how high would AEW have to be? I mean, and of course, again, they are giving away the biggest thing that they've ever given away on TV.
Yeah, I would agree with Way. First of all, to Cody and the rest of the EVPs over at AEW, don't listen to those numbers. Pay $3 million out of pocket for a recount. I'm sure there's some votes. There's some viewers lying around here or there that were missed when they did the initial count. But all jokes aside, I think it will be AEW because, like Way said, this is an actual big pay-per-view like event on TNT. And like just from viewing my Twitter, again, like I don't know how much Twitter counts into it. I'm not out here checking for AEW on IG, so I don't know what their numbers is looking like. But on Twitter, like most of the conversation I've seen has leaned towards talking about the AEW show and less towards TakeOver at this point. So I think AEW is probably going to bounce back with a really strong number this week.
There you have it. That's all I got for the news this week, folks.
Andrew Thompson, thank you as always. We'll hear from you one more time this coming Wednesday for Rewind to Dynamite. But if you want to keep up with all of Andrew's work, he is just working so hard doing everything at postwrestling.com. So go check for his work. Long updates like almost on a daily basis right now, as well as all the other news throughout the day. So thank you very much, Andrew, for your continued really hard work.
No doubt, man. Peace, Nate and Wayne. Have a good show, man.
Andrew Thompson, ladies and gentlemen. I'm telling y'all, Andrew Thompson is the LeBron James of wrestling podcast, ladies and gentlemen. And what I mean by that is we in the Christmas season now, Way. And every Christmas, I'm sure the listeners out there, they seen that commercial where the people are having a Christmas party and LeBron James come through the window with some Sprite and he's like, hey, want a Sprite cranberry? And that's Andrew Thompson right now on your wrestling feeds, on your Twitter, on your podcast. You just minding your business. And then Andrew Thompson comes through the window like, hey, want some news? And that's why this young brother going places. So Andrew Thompson, go have yourself a cranberry Sprite. Enjoy the rest of the night. And we always appreciate you, brother.
All right, peace, Nate. I'm gonna catch y'all, man. Be easy.
Show's over. Like, I don't know how we follow up with that, but man, we shall try. Thank you very much, Andrew. And I'm, I hope to hear you two together on the air again very soon. Yeah, Nate.
That Bushby and Thompson episode was fun.
Yeah. Definitely more of that hopefully in the future. But on the Post Wrestling schedule this particular week, we have a huge week because we have the return of John Pollock to the Post Wrestling airwaves after taking a very, very deserved layoff for the birth of his child. John makes his return tomorrow. Not on one of our shows, but on a show where he will be interviewing Dave Meltzer. That's right. John Pollock and Dave Meltzer on the very same show. John will be talking to Dave about the Wrestling Observer's new Wrestling Observer Yearbook 97 is what it's called. So this is Dave's new book, I believe, chronicling, several major events in one of the most important years in professional wrestling history. So hear all about that. As well, Wednesday, it's our usual lineup of Up Next. As Andrew mentioned, it's a big show for NXT and Rewind to Dynamite. Our friends at Up Next will be talking about the go-home edition of NXT heading into TakeOver, and me and Bruce Lord will be returning to talk about Winter is Coming on that edition of Rewind to Dynamite. And then on Friday, we've got Rewind a SmackDown Live. This will be the official show where John Pollock and I will reunite, and we'll also reunite, John, with all of you listeners who are members of the Post Wrestling Cafe, because that show, of course, is live. I got some confusion on our forum today. Somebody thought that, why did Wei Ting suddenly make Rewind to SmackDown only on Zoom? It's not just on Zoom. It's on Zoom, but it's always available as it's always been on the Post Wrestling Cafe RSS feed. So subscribe to that. You get the show as normal. But if you want to actually listen to it live, if you want to interact with the chat room, if you want to call in, then you join us on the Zoom link that we send out at 10:15 Eastern. So that's Friday. And then on the weekend, Sunday, WH Park returns with The Long and Winding Road. He will be joined by Brian Elliott, and they'll be talking about Toshiaki Kawada taking on Akira Taue from April 12th, 1993. That's April 12th, 1993. Kawada versus Taue. If you want to get the jump on that, you can YouTube that, and you can find a link. Maybe official or unofficial, I can't really say, but you can find it on the internet. And then on Sunday evening, it is NXT TakeOver War Games, and so that means post-show with Davey and Braden on the Up Next feed, but also a watch-along throughout the show, throughout the evening on the Up Next YouTube or the Up Next Twitch channel, which from what I understand, Davey's been very active in lately, playing video games, seemingly on a daily basis. So you can find that at twitch.tv/upnextpodcast. So that's a plug for everything that's coming up at postwrestling.com.
Sounds like a lot is going on here at Sort of Post Wrestling. So I am I hope everybody out there that's checking out the podcast, maybe we got some newfound listeners or new traffic this week, Way, in the midst of that review. I hope the folks are enjoying the content.
I hope that our newest listener managed to find a link to Rewinded SmackDown over the past week. But anyway, let's get into this episode of Raw, Nate. Thank you. I want to thank you right now once again, actually, for joining us for so many of these weeks, sacrificing your Mondays, fighting that itis from your turkey. Tell us about your viewing experience of Raw tonight.
Wait, here's what happened. So what had happened was, again, had a little bit of turkey left over today, made a nice turkey sandwich this evening. And people that eat turkey, they know that there's a critical element in turkey, an ingredient called tryptophan. And tryptophan gives you the itis. And for those that don't know about the itis, it means once you eat, you settle in for a nice nap. And so I ate probably around 5, surfed the internet for a little bit, settled down, sat on the couch. And when I woke up, it was 9:15. And I'm like, what? Why does 9:15 sound like I should be doing something right now, Wei Ting? And then I was like, oh, that's right. I'm supposed to be watching Raw tonight for this review. And so, I missed the whole first hour and 15 minutes of Raw tonight. But again, I feel like, Wei, just going back to Twitter, I was able to catch up with some of the occurrences from what happened on Raw. And so hopefully my missing that first hour won't leave the postmarks out there feeling like they're not getting this full review.
Well, I think, Nate, you've actually managed to stumble on the optimal viewing experience for Raw, because you ended up having a burst of energy for the rest of the show.
Yes, as opposed to trying to run those last 5 meters and run through the tape. I woke up energized. And so, I had some energy tonight. And so I'm feeling good for this review, Way.
Well, I had the exact opposite interaction, I would say. I started this show. I mean, I've been up since 7 a.m. this morning. So I started the show at the normal time, 8 o'clock. I'm watching it. By the third hour, I mean, I didn't eat turkey last night, but I was already feeling the tryptophan coming into my system, coursing through my veins. I was dozing off. So maybe you'll have to fill in at the end of this show as I maybe inform you of the opening of it. But together we shall piece together a coherent review.
That's what makes a good tag team, Way. Like, you started off the match, and then I got the hot tag around 9:15, and we can see it through to the end.
Well, excellent. So Raw, a Moment of Bliss starts off the show, and her guest, Alexa's guest tonight, is Randy Orton. Alexa asked Randy if he thought about why the Fiend attacked him at the end of Raw last week. Randy says he's known Bray Wyatt for a long time, but he's never been introduced to the Fiend. They have a lot in common, but the main difference between the two of them is that the Fiend wears his pain on his exterior, while Randy's pain is kept bottled up so he can blend in. He hears voices, and the Fiend hears voices too, but the Fiend's voices are Randy's. Sorry, it's difficult recapping some of this. Years ago, Randy had to figure out what Bray Wyatt's vulnerability was, and once he found out, he burned it to the ground. So, now he needs to find the Fiend's vulnerability, and he looks at Alexa, and he says, "It looks like I have, don't you think?" Alexa then stares Randy down and asks Randy if the voices in his head are telling him lines. And then she asks, who's manipulating whom? At this point, the lights switch off, and then they come back on, and the Fiend has arrived, and Randy suddenly has Alexa in his arms. The Fiend motions for Randy to hand Alexa back to him, and Randy slowly makes the exchange like what is it? Like a
hostage situation.
Exactly, like a hostage situation. So Randy slowly hands Alexa back, and then he sneaks away out of the ring as if he had won, saying, "Who's laughing now?" And the announcers kind of confirm that, it appears Randy has indeed found the Fiend's weakness. So, I mean, I know you didn't watch this, Nate, but you I suppose might have heard about it on Twitter. Like, what is the sort of like the casual fan scrolling through Twitter's reaction to a segment like this?
Oh, and see, Twitter didn't even do justice to the Wai Ting recap. Like that, that like just brought it to life, Way. Like I thought, like a lot of what I saw on Twitter about this segment was mixed, which seems par for the course with these segments. Like I think you're going to have a contingency of the audience that really is into this and digs it, and then you're going to have a contingency of the audience that this does nothing for. And so, like, just hearing you recap it, like I'm sure Randy put on a decent performance because Randy's usually good when he's kind of playing this methodical character. And I'm sure Bray and Alexa did their parts well. I just don't know if the story is connecting the way the company thinks it is with the majority of the audience.
Any Fiend storyline where like you enter any sort of realm like this is going to be somewhat divisive, but what I can say from watching Randy here, I thought Orton was pretty good at spelling it out for the viewer, like in pretty simple terms, what sort of, the story is here. Orton defeated Bray Wyatt in the past by finding his weakness in Sister Abigail and, burning Sister Abigail to death, I suppose. And now he intends on doing the same with the Fiend. And he thinks that the vulnerability is Alexa Bliss. So this scene, I think, was made to prove to Randy that, in fact, the Fiend does care about Alexa Bliss enough for him to be his vulnerability. So, but what makes it, I would say, a little bit more interesting and maybe even a bit more divisive for some people who might be looking for something less, I don't know, horror movie and more straight up, professional wrestling sports. They were trying to indicate that I think Alexa is simply manipulating Randy in all of this. And the Fiend is manipulating Randy into thinking that, you think you found his vulnerability? Well, you're wrong. So they have 2 more weeks, I would say. TLC is 3 weeks away, so they got 2 more episodes to continue the story. So there's definitely going to be more to come. But I am going to give this a chance. I think Orton, this time around, will have hopefully learned from some of the things that really dragged the last few down. And that maybe the writers will have learned about what worked with the Fiend in the past, and hopefully this time the story will be a lot more easier to understand. And I would say from the first chapter that we saw tonight, I was into it.
Yeah, and I think again, like I said last week, I think injecting Alexa into all of this has made it better. And like there's a part of me that thinks like maybe at the end of all of this, Alexa is the mastermind. Like maybe she got sucked into this thing, but she's manipulating everybody. She's manipulating Randy. She's manipulating Bray, even though he doesn't know it. And maybe Alexa is the real villain out of all of this. That's
a very interesting possibility. So all throughout the episode, they're promoting Drew McIntyre returning after the Survivor Series. They show highlights of Drew's 2020, including winning the Royal Rumble. And then we get our Symphony of Destruction match. I'm kind of sorry you actually missed this one, Nate, because this is, of course, Elias's signature match. Basically a hardcore match, like inside a Long and McQuaid, or I guess a Guitar Center for you Americans. So Elias intercepts Jeff Hardy's violin dive with a big knee. He slams Jeff's head into a grand piano. But then the grand piano starts to shake, and so he lifts the cover, and it's R-Truth hiding inside. So the rest of the 24/7 live crew come down the ring. They start giving chase to him. Gulak, Metalik, and Dorado all get smashed with instruments by Elias and Jeff as we go to commercial break. No other reason for them to be here but that. Elias sends Jeff into a guitar in the corner. Then he takes 3 guitar picks and shoves them in between his fingers like a kid pretending to be Wolverine. He's a guitar pick Wolverine. Like a Wolverine laced with guitar picks on his skeleton. And then he starts punching Jeff with his guitar pick fists. And he starts to drive a pick into Jeff's face. Elias goes to knee Jeff against the gong, but Hardy moves away. Jeff goes for a whisper in the wind, but Elias strikes him in the air with a guitar. He rips the neck from this acoustic guitar and then attempts to stab Jeff Hardy with it. But Jeff moves away, and Elias ends up jabbing the neck of this guitar into a speaker, which electrocutes him.
Why is the speaker plugged in, Way? Why is the speaker plugged in?
Well, that's a great question. I'm also curious to know how much metal was in that neck of that guitar, because I don't think it was. I guess it might have been strung, but man, anyway, it was a miracle. It was a miracle that all these things happen to happen. Somebody decides to plug in these speakers. He happened to just touch enough metal on that guitar neck to get shocked. Anyway, Jeff attacks Elias with the double bass, lays him on a table stacked with the violins, and I'm hoping you saw this one, Nate. Jeff Hardy climbs up to the top turnbuckle and delivers one of the most dangerous swanton bombs I've ever seen Jeff Hardy perform. He dives off the top turnbuckle, lands his body onto Elias through a table on the outside, but then also lands the back of his head directly on the bottom step of the ring stairs right below him. So basically delivered a great headbutt to the stairs using the back of his head. It was, man, I was extremely concerned for Jeff Hardy. I mean, seeing online, there seemed to be a lot of the same as well. Man, it's just, I don't know. It's I feel like Jeff Hardy by this point would recognize some of the big risks involved in something like this. And, something as simple as moving a ring steps away would have entered his mind. But as somebody who, I know you, Nate, can appreciate the value of musical instruments as I do. I hated this match. As a man who hates really stupid stunts in wrestling, I hated this match. And I think as a man who has seen more than his fair share of WWE Plunder matches, I also hated this match. I mean, there was really no difference between this and any other WWE Plunder match except for a plugged-in speaker that shocked Elias. And then a really scary spot at the end. So I hope Jeff Hardy is fine after this.
Yes, me too, Way. I kind of want to go back and watch this whole match to just see the car crash, see the train wreck that it was. But yeah, this type of thing, and again, I'm not a WWE writer, Way, so I can't tell these people how to do their job. But if you've got all this fancy musical equipment, instead of having this feud between Jeff and Elias, why not make the story that Jeff, coming off a Survivor Series, is like, hey man, I really like the concept of teamwork. Maybe I should form a band. And so now for the next 8 weeks, Way, we've got Jeff trying to convince Elias and maybe Truth and a couple other people to join his band. And that's our story going forward. Jeff has to beat these people in a series of matches. And if Jeff wins, they join the band. And if Jeff loses, the band is finished.
I love it, first of all. He can reform Peroxygen.
Yes.
You know, using wrestlers. I think that's brilliant. A battle of the bands is ultimately, I think, what we should be heading towards. You know, on a pay-per-view at TLC. But yeah, like, here's the thing, okay? Like, my legitimate gripe with like some of these is that so much of this is just like hitting each other over the head with instruments, when I think you could do so much more. Like, you can have so much more fun with the idea of, like, you know, a musical instrument match. And we're in the era now where I think the hardcore out of arena match has been taken to a new level with the several cinematic matches that we've seen, taking several concepts and really just kind of dialing up the comedy in them. So much so that, I don't know, like, this is like the third time they've done one of these symphony of, what is it?
Symphony of Destruction.
Symphony of Destruction matches. And each one has just been you know, your typical hardcore match. So
that's not a bad idea, because I'm sure like there's probably some musical talent in Orlando who's stuck because of the pandemic. So like, yeah, like go to an actual Guitar Center way and like clear it out, make sure it's safe for everybody.
They're going bankrupt apparently.
Oh, they have?
I think so. I think they're still open, but they're filing for bankruptcy.
Oh, too bad. R.I.P. Guitar Center. Well, go to some local music store and like, you could even bring in like maybe some local talent that just hanging around for no reason. Like, I don't know, like maybe, you know, JC Chazé from the Backstreet Boys or NSYNC. I forget which one he was in.
That's random.
Way.
He was in NSYNC.
He's in NSYNC. Okay,
yeah.
Like maybe he's hanging around. Chris Kirkpatrick, one of these guys is hanging out in Orlando, and you can have them as like the button to the end of the musical segment in this music store.
Here's the thing, like, legitimately, if like Jeff Hardy all of a sudden, like, if they did do a battle of the bands and it was like Elias versus Peroxygen, I think Elias would win. Like, if you had a legitimate audience there voting on like who was the better band, like, I think Elias would get more votes. Like, that band is that bad.
The only song of theirs that I liked was the old heel Jeff Hardy theme in TNA, and that's because they played it every week, and it got to the point where at first I hated it, but then I came to like it just because it was so random.
That's the way I am with most wrestling bands, I suppose. Keith Lee and Matt Riddle are in the back. Riddle annoys Keith Lee with his like overly talkative surfer shtick. Riddle says he's always wanted to face Drew because he's so chill and he does that Austin Powers thing. I'm not making this up. And then he does an impression of Fat Bastard from Austin Powers.
Oh, no.
Was it like two or three? I forget. You know, I would say like this Riddle character is very much geared towards like, you know, children, like a younger audience, maybe your niece, you know, the Instagram generation. But like, would your niece appreciate this Austin Powers reference from the year 2000?
No, like that is so like he really should. He should be like this updated version of almost like Shaggy from Scooby-Doo, where like, yes, we've got these stoner overtones, but he's really just this silly, goofy character. And yeah, like he should be doing TikTok dances and he should be, you know, appealing to that IG generation. But yeah, like my nieces, I think the oldest niece has seen the first Austin Powers and then maybe the third one, because that's the one with Beyonce. But the other two, like they don't know about Austin Powers.
So it tells me that they're not necessarily aiming for a younger audience with this Riddle character, and that they think these jokes are meant to land with like 40-year-olds and 50-year-olds. So I don't know. This was hilarious, I guess. We have a recap of Retribution taking on Ricochet, their feud from 3 weeks ago. This was Ali's response to a program that was set up 3 weeks ago, so really taking his time with this response. He's pissed off. Why can't Ricochet see that he should be joining Retribution? For the first time, we hear on Raw, at least to my knowledge, Slapjack speaking. Slapjack speaks. He says, while the rest of the world saw him as a joke, Ali saw him for what he really is, a weapon of mass destruction. I would say he's definitely a bigger joke now than when he was Shane Thorne in NXT. Like, now he wears a cut-up paper plate on his face, and his name is Slapjack. You know, like, I think Ali was probably trolling Shane Thorne. He's like, yeah, well, hey, man, wear this. It'll make you look cool. I promise.
Have we seen a group, like, fall so quickly since, like, maybe, like, the original, the Nexus? Like, has a group fallen so far?
Man, at least the Nexus had like a pay-per-view, like main event. Like this was, I mean, I would say last week might have been bottom for them, being on main event, doing an angle on main event with the gobbledygooker. So I would say this week was actually an improvement for them. So I don't know. Yeah, it's hard to say, Nate. Slapjack versus Ricochet. You ready?
This is what I woke up for, Way.
Oh, good. You heard the sounds of Slapjack and just woke you right back up. So Ali distracts Ricochet. I wrote in my notes Slapjack and it autocorrected to Snapchat. So maybe that's the younger audience that they should.
Yes, maybe he'll join Matt Riddle's faction next.
Yes, Snapchat. Snapchat pulls him from the corner, executes a cannonball. Ricochet goes for a comeback, hits a standing shooting star press for 2. Ali panics and tells T-Bar and Mace to show up. Ricochet dives onto all of them to take him out. Meanwhile, Dana Brooke shows up at ringside and slaps Ali. This was her way of sending a message to Reckoning for attacking her before Survivor Series a couple weeks back. Ricochet continues to fight off Mace and T-Bar and Ali alone, resulting in Slapjack catching a really nice swinging belly to back suplex and then getting his first singles victory on Raw. So continuing the rivalry between Ricochet and Retribution, so much so to the point where Slapjack gets his first win by pinning him. So do you think Ricochet will eventually join Retribution, Nate?
I would hope not, Way, just because, like, why? Like, what motivation does Ricochet have for that? Like, if Ricochet wasn't interested in associating with the Hurt Business, like, why would you then go to the B team?
He missed his chance. He probably sees like, oh my god, look at Cedric. That could have been me.
That could have been me.
I guess I'll take the, I'll take something because he's losing to Retribution right now.
Yeah, and like the fact that in this match we had not only had your man Snapchat picking up his first victory, but then we also had Dana Brooke slapping the leader of this group. And like Dana Brooke is coming out of this as the big hero of the segment, and I'm like, what the hell is going on in 2020, Way?
The pecking order is Dana Brooke, Retribution, and then Ricochet at the bottom. So I mean, you kind of like pointed it out. It's very much the same story with Ricochet of him possibly joining Retribution, just like we've seen Ricochet possibly joining Hurt Business. So yeah, I don't know. We'll see if he's triumphant, and we'll see how this ends up on main event. Miz TV. His special guest is one of their opponents tonight. It's Sheamus, who is teaming with Drew later tonight in our main event against Miz and Morrison. Miz says 2 weeks ago, Sheamus made one of the most heartfelt gestures he's seen when he returned Drew's chest back to him from Scotland. And what did Sheamus get in return? Nothing. Miz says when he wins the WWE title, he says he would give his friend John Morrison his first crack at the belt. So why hasn't Drew done the same? Miz tries to get Sheamus to agree to cash in on his 20 years of resentment tonight against Drew so that Miz can cash in on his Money in the Bank contract. Sheamus laughs. Miz at this point gets serious. When was the last time you tasted a WWE championship? 5 years ago for 2 months? Now your best friend is at the top of the heap, and if you want to laugh at something, laugh at your career because it's a joke. Sheamus walks up to the Miz. He says while Miz likes to talk about what he wants to do, Sheamus likes to use his hands, and he starts fighting them both. Meanwhile, Miz lays him out with a briefcase, and Miz and Morrison end up standing tall. So we continue furthering Sheamus's babyface turn. I mean, I would say in weeks past, Sheamus's like kind of like, babyface persona only existed with Drew McIntyre in scenes with Drew McIntyre. It felt so over the top that you knew he was manipulating Drew and that he was going to turn on him. This week felt to me like a very deliberate attempt at actually making him a sympathetic babyface to the audience watching at home.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, Way, because it took me half of the segment to realize, oh yeah, Sheamus is the babyface in this equation. And so, I think we talked about it last week when we talked about that Riddle match that Sheamus had. Like, if this is kind of the repackaging, the rejuvenation of Sheamus leading up to an eventual match with Drew, I'm here for it. I'm not quite sure if I like the outfit. Now I'm turning into WH. I'm not sure I like
the white tank top.
Yeah, they like with the suspenders, like the Dexy's Midnight Runner outfit that Sheamus was rocking here.
That's what he's going for.
I was gonna say that's another reference that the IG generation probably won't get. But I think by the end of the segment, you did come off with this looking like, like I can actually, root for Sheamus at least against these heels here, and so like that's why it makes the stuff later in the night with people trying to plant these seeds of dissent. Like, I get what they were going for away, but it feels like you went through all this trouble to try to make Sheamus this good babyface just to reaffirm what we were thinking before you went through that trouble.
Well, ultimately, it's got to end up with the Sheamus versus Drew McIntyre match, and you would think that it would be Sheamus in that role as heel. But, to what degree of heel would he be? Would he be somebody who would be straight up, I tricked you, ha ha ha, I'm evil? Or would he be more of a heel who, feels cheated because of a legitimate reason by Drew McIntyre? Could it be jealousy that's fueling him? And could it be a more noble reason why he would be hating Drew McIntyre?
You never paid me back for the postage it took to get that package shipped to America.
Oh my God, the duty on that thing, the weight, and it's a weapon. Oh my God, I don't envy him at all.
In the middle of a pandemic, no less.
Jeez, this is the weight alone. Yeah. So I thought this was interesting. I thought Miz and Morrison were really good here. And I think Sheamus, listen to how much we're talking about Sheamus. He, to me, has showcased a very different, pretty compelling, set of performances throughout this story with Drew McIntyre. Mm. So we meet up with Lana and Asuka. They're in the back in Gorilla. Asuka speaks to Lana in Japanese. And I think I heard Lana briefly respond in Russian. So I think the joke is that they each speak their own language, but they can communicate perfectly, like Han Solo and Chewbacca. So Sarah asks Lana what they just discussed. Lana smiles and says, "You wouldn't understand, but Shayna and Nia are about to." So we got Shayna and Nia in the back now. Nia says Lana and Asuka got lucky last week when they beat them. Shayna blames Nia for not putting Lana through a table, while Nia blames Shayna for getting pinned. And Nia says tonight she's going to put Lana through a table. Nia and Lana versus Asuka and Lana. Nia and Shayna versus Asuka and Lana. It's a non-title match. They are continuing to book Lana to show her slightly increased, I would say, in-ring abilities. They did a bit of groundwork with Lana and Shayna here. A pair of baseball slides resulted in them being caught and swung simultaneously against the barricades by Nia and Shayna. Back from commercial, Nia screams, "Who do you think you are?" And then just catches Lana with a very stiff-looking back elbow, destroys her with a big Beal and a corner splash. Lana gets this really awkward hot tag where she's crawling to the corner. Shayna jumps at her, actually catches her in a choke, but then they kind of fall into the corner and into Asuka's tag. So Asuka just begins her. I don't know if that was intentional or not. Didn't feel like a traditional build to a hot tag, but Asuka comes in. Shayna knocks her down with a big kick. Lana tags herself back in. She dives off the top with a big splash. Shayna rolls through and puts her into the Kirifuda clutch. At this point, Asuka breaks it up with a sliding kick to Shayna's head. Shayna is out from the kick, and Lana rolls on top of her for the 3 count. So, again, Shayna Baszler is pinned 2 weeks in a row by Asuka last week, and this week Lana. But much of the credit going to Lana, I suppose, this time.
And again, way to build off of our metaphor at the end of the program from last week. Who helped Lana assume this victory? It was another woman of color. So the white privilege gimmick rolls on, and then I'm not happy with Shayna taking these losses. I'm not happy with Shayna taking these losses, but I am interested in what the end game is because again, I don't think that Lana is connecting as this sympathetic babyface that the company thinks she is.
There's definitely something now. I think they've done a good job of establishing the bully in Nia Jax continually tormenting Lana. I feel like sometimes they go through these things and it's they go so far with it that I end up forgetting how we started and the awkward transition that you had with Lana being a heel to a babyface. Anyway, but is it is it getting people's attention right now? I don't know. I think it's still really hard to say. I do like this team of Lana and Asuka. I think they kind of fulfill a lot of qualities about the other For one thing, like, matches are a little better when Asuka is in there with Lana.
Yes.
And maybe with somebody like Lana there for Asuka, she'd be able to cut maybe a more interesting type of promo. What they have right now here with like the two of them speaking different languages but understanding each other, that's kind of cute. It might make for some decent segments, but yeah. Where do you see this feud ending up?
It's weird way because yes, like Lana is the babyface, Asuka is certainly a babyface in this situation, but it almost feels like back during the Attitude Era, or maybe even a little bit later, like when the Dudley Boys were hot. And all you wanted to see, the payoff at the end of the story, was somebody go through a table. And it feels like they're really hitting that hard. Like they hit it hard 9 times previous to this way. And it feels like the end of the story should be either Lana going through another table or Lana somehow putting Nia through a table.
Like Lana Samoan dropping
Yes.
Nia Jax through a table? That'd be
Yes.
awesome.
Insert Monique gif. I would like to see that.
Oh, you should tweet that out whenever that happens and see if it does as well as the Hamilton one. Yeah, so we shall see how this unfolds. Sheamus is with Drew McIntyre backstage. Drew teases Sheamus about the beating Miz and Morrison gave him. He says it was must-see TV, and a physical guy like Sheamus must have thought it was fun. Sheamus agrees that, yeah, it was a bit of fun, but says if the roles were reversed, I would go out to help you, Drew McIntyre. Sheamus says that was just the appetizer, and tonight, it's the main course. So these two, despite Drew not helping Sheamus at all during his beating, they're still very friendly with one another because they're just guys who love to fight, and it's not like Miz and Morrison's beatdown was that bad anyway. It's just Miz and Morrison.
Yeah, but also Sheamus is not wrong. Like if I'm out here getting beat down, like regardless of who's doing the beating, and you're in the back at catering, like come on, buddy.
Again, sympathetic babyface tonight. So we catch up with the New Day here. Kofi announces and congratulates Woods on his G4 hosting gig. Were you ever a fan of G4?
Yeah, back in the day, and I've been following Xavier's campaign to be one of the hosts on G4. So yeah, like Xavier Woods seems to be one of the rare examples. You know, we talked all this past month. There are a lot of people who've been talking this past month about WWE performers doing outside work. Like Xavier Woods is the guy who it feels like if the company really wanted to crack down on him, he could just leave because he's got so much else going on.
It's true. But you know, I found this really interesting because like Sasha Banks was on The Mandalorian, a huge show. No mention of it whatsoever. She's credited as Mercedes Varnado in the credits of the show. And I mean, what is it? Woods is going by. Is he going by Austin Creed or Xavier Woods? I've actually kind of been told.
I think it's Austin Creed.
Okay, so he's going by Austin Creed. Fine, but like, this is essentially like a huge promotion of this thing on Raw. Wood says being a sports entertainer is important to him. Being a future King of the Ring is important to him. He's continuing to put that out there really hard. But he says video games are his happy place, and he thanks anyone who's ever been associated with up, up, down, down. So, I mean, this like prime real estate to not just promote, the G4 thing, but of course up, up, down, down. Like it tells me that WWE is very on board with this venture in a way that they might not be with, Sasha Banks and The Mandalorian.
Yeah, and it also goes to show you, like, I feel like the New Day is at such a position where they're almost Teflon. And this is not to say that, like, Sasha or somebody like Zelina Vega or any of the other performers on the roster wouldn't deserve the same opportunity. But it's almost like if the WWE were to crack down on the New Day, it would be like cutting off your nose to spite your face. Because they mean so much from, a marketing standpoint. They've got so much goodwill amongst the fans out there that they'd be silly to try to strong arm, Xavier in this situation.
Of course, I guess the other explanation, this was brought to my attention too by some listeners, is that G4 is also an NBC Universal channel, which USA is as well. So I guess that really makes perfect sense. Whereas, of course, Disney Plus is not one of their properties. So... we shall. I mean, I guess expect more, co-promotion between G4 and WWE in the future.
And this is again, I hate to keep going back and taking shots at our bro here, Mr. Riddle, but like what Xavier did in this segment, like if you want to reach like my niece's generation, like that's how you do it with stuff like this, by mentioning G4 and up, up, down, down. Like, that's an organic way to broaden your viewership as opposed to Matt Riddle making Austin Powers jokes.
Well, I was going to say, I think Woods would have really hit a home run with this promo if he added "oh, behave," or yeah, I'm trying to think what other quotables. Oh God, $1 million.
Kobe's like, so how much are they paying you? $1 million, and then he just started laughing.
Oh man! All right. They proceed to mock the Hurt Business for failing to beat them 3 times. And this includes, of course, last week's weird count-out screw-up, which I think Meltzer reported was a legitimate, they missed their time to get into the ring and the ref counted them out, which is crazy. They were playing each of these things in a dream sequence, and at this point, the Hurt Business arrives. MVP, so the New Day are bragging that, they've had 3 opportunities and they haven't beaten us. Meanwhile, MVP comes out and says, your math is wrong. We're actually 2-2 because we won when the New Day got counted out. First of all, I mean, the New Day did mention that, the Hurt Business won, but they didn't leave with the titles. That was not even part of the count at all. The count is the fact that they left the 3 times they've had to face the New Day, and 3 times they were unable to win the championship. Meanwhile, MVP says, we're actually 2-2, so we're tied, so you owe us a title shot. First of all, where did he get that extra number from? They've only faced each other 3 times. They would be 2-1 if anything.
I mean, this is a time in the world right now where a lot of people are examining numbers and how you count numbers. And so I'm sure MVP, again, paid $3 million to get people to go back and look at these matches, and he found an extra match.
Wow, okay. Well, I buy that explanation. So I don't know if this was just a case of heel logic or just bad math or maybe exactly what you said. Either one works. Cedric, I thought, continued to be very aggressive and confident throughout the show. It's a new Cedric Alexander. He says he's going to show Woods that last week was just a fluke. Last week was a fluke because we otherwise would have been able to get back into the ring in time. And he says Woods' dream G4 gig is about to turn into a nightmare. So it's Woods versus Cedric.
How is that possible? What bearing does this match have on his employment with G4, Cedric? Are you wrestling him for the spot?
I think he was just trying to work a way to fit in Nightmare with Dream. He's Dream. How can I make your G4 thing sound badass, in my heel promo? You had a dream to be a host of G4. Well, my match is going to be a nightmare for you. That's about it. So it's Woods versus Cedric. It's Woods' first singles match in over a year, of course. The announcers make light of MVP's questionable math here on commentary, and Joe says if Tom has a problem with it, he can take it up with the Hurt Business. So they kind of saved it there. Woods hits the honor roll for 2, brainbuster from Cedric for 2. Woods catches Cedric's suicide dive and drives him into the barricade. Back in the ring, Cedric hits a sudden lumbar check. And then it's a clean victory for Cedric Alexander over one half of the tag team champions. What did you think of the match?
I thought it was a solid match. Any combination of the New Day and the Hurt Business, I think at minimum, you're going to get a solid TV match. I'm surprised at how decisive the victory was for Cedric. It's interesting, though, Wade, because there's a part of me, while I respect all of these performers, I'm kind of tired of this feud. And I didn't think that's something that I would say when you've got people like MVP and Shelton and Lashley and Cedric going up against Kofi and Xavier. I'm hoping that once we get to the pay-per-view, this is all said and done.
Well, you've seen 3 matches between these two already, so I don't really blame you. And
I will say, and I mentioned it last week, seeing Xavier back, he feels refreshed, and he feels like he's got some more fire. And I think the fact that I didn't even know it, Way, that this was his first singles match since he's returned from the injury. Like, that's a really cool thing for him.
So afterwards, they do a really interesting thing where Cedric goes up the ramp celebrating by himself. Like, he's just all into his big win tonight. And he's almost celebrating a little too hard because MVP and Shelton are left back at the ring looking at him like he's weird. So I don't know what's happening here. Are they going to kick Cedric Alexander out for being too celebratory?
I'm hoping not. Like, yeah, I'm hoping this doesn't turn into like Randy Orton in Evolution, where Cedric's going to get too full of himself, and we're going to get him on Bobby Lashley's shoulders one week and MVP with the thumbs down. I'm hoping that's not where this is headed, Way.
They're not nearly there yet with Cedric Alexander. Are you kidding me? Like that would take months, and this is just like he's only a month into this whole feud, I think.
Yeah, I think what happened, though, was Cedric is just really happy because, again, he thought because he pinned Xavier, that means he gets an extra check from G4, but that's not the case.
He achieved the dream, yeah. We got AJ, and I don't think we mentioned this last week, but Jordan has a new name. And
yes.
It is Almost. It is Almost, which is the nickname that Matt Riddle actually gave him, so it stuck. It's Almost. Riddle shows up. He makes a really bad joke to AJ. Man.
As Matt Riddle does.
You want to recap this one? You want to take this, Nate?
Oh, is this? No, I'm thinking about the Sheamus or the Miz AJ segment later with the pie, which is equally ridiculous.
Okay, I'll take it. I know you've got it in perfect transcription right there. You just don't want to do it, so I'll try. So he says to AJ, "You better hop away, Skipper, because that carrot is mine tonight." And like, where's the joke, right? Almost laughs at this. He laughs at this because he knows the inside joke reference that Matt Riddle is making. Because Matt Riddle has a bunny named Skipper. And this reveals to AJ that the two have been hanging out without him. So, man, we get more jokes about, like, AJ says, "Why would you name your rabbit Skipper? It should be called Hopper." And so Riddle says, "I already have turtles named Hopper." And Riddle says AJ reminds him about his bunny because he's got great hops and he's totally cute. And so AJ shoves Riddle, says it wasn't funny, and he leaves. This was the part where I was really like feeling the itis, just the great humor here from Matt Riddle.
Like in 2020 Way, AJ Styles and I don't agree on a lot of things. Like we talked about that in the news segment, but I am with AJ 100% here. Like this wasn't funny. Again, a little bit of Riddle goes a long, long way. And I like that they're trying to give him more time to establish his promo and get his character working, but it's just not clicking right now, Way. And I don't know, again, like what segment of the audience, other than maybe the stoner audience, like who is this for?
Hold on a second. Like, I think there's stoner humor that is actually funny. Like, this was not it. This does not feel like anything that anybody who's ever smoked weed would come up with. Like, don't discredit weed smokers like that. You know, like, weed smoker would not, like, come up with this whole thing about, like, a buddy named Skipper and then Hopper and Turtle. I just, man, like, you hear stories all the time about like, oh, like Vince rewriting scripts at the last minute. This felt like a segment that was written like in 5 minutes and not even, and then just told for them to go out there to do it. It's awful. And I know it's supposed to be bad, everybody. I know the joke is that Matt Riddle is supposed to be a bad comedian. And somehow that's supposed to make me like him. But God, it's so bad that I just don't like him.
Yeah. And I also think like, it helps depending on who's playing off of him because compared to the MVP Brogert segment last week, like I thought that segment came across a little bit better than this one. But even so, like if you've got Vince McMahon, who's supposed to be putting words into the mouth of this millennial stoner, I guess, like it's not a good combination, Way.
Like that tells me Vince McMahon has seen Austin Powers too. I mean, he might have seen it recently.
I'll behave. Do I make you horny, baby? Do I?
Oh, fuck. That is amazing. Oh, sudden triple threat match. We got Keith Lee versus AJ Styles versus Riddle. Lee hits an impressive leapfrog drop-down sequence done to both AJ and Riddle at the same time. Riddle delivers a big floating bro to both Lee and AJ on the floor, sending us to break. Big bro taunts from Riddle to everybody, but Styles blocks the last one with his legs up in the air. Riddle counters a spirit bomb with a triangle as AJ storms in, but Lee just swats him away, using Riddle as a weapon. Riddle attempts to powerbomb Lee out of the corner, but the weight is too much for him. Styles lands a crossbody to Lee, then Lee throws him off and right onto Riddle for a 2 count. We get a big exchange of strikes between Riddle and Lee, when Riddle actually knocks Lee off of his feet, but in comes AJ with the surprise phenomenal forearm to Riddle, pinning Matt Riddle to earn a title shot. What'd you think of the match?
I really like this way. Like, this, to me, was the highlight of the show. You know, I had high hopes for it, and my hopes were met. Like, it wasn't the greatest match I've ever seen, but for a TV match on a random Monday after Thanksgiving, like, I thought all 3 guys worked hard. Again, you know, going back to what I had mentioned on the last episode we did, like, this was kind of like an update on the old TNA special, where we've got a couple X Division guys in with the big monster, and everybody got to showcase what they do well. Keith Lee had some impressive spots. Riddle got to show off his ring work, which is much better than his mic work right now. And then AJ, you know, ultimately got the win, which I think was the right move. So, like, I thought this match came together really well, and it was like, if you're going to go back and watch anything from tonight's Raw, like if you missed it and you're just listening to Way and I to decide on what you want to watch, I would definitely recommend to go back and watch this triple threat.
A very good 3-way match. All 3 I thought looked spectacular. Very good high flying from AJ. Good looking strikes from Riddle. And great power base in Keith Lee for the others. So we have AJ versus Drew being a pay-per-view match. What do you think of that?
I think it's good. Like, there's a part of me that wanted to go to AJ and Keith Lee, but then I remembered, Way, that the pay-per-view is only a couple weeks away. And that's like, AJ and Keith is a story that you can build to. Plus we've got, you know, not AJ and Keith, Drew and Keith is a story we can build to. Plus, we've got the Drew and Sheamus story, which we're going to talk about again as the night goes on. And so I think, like, if you want to get a good match out of Drew and put on a good show and ultimately Drew retains the belt, then I think AJ, out of the 3 choices, was the right guy, because AJ, unlike Riddle or Keith Lee, is not going to lose much momentum by taking the loss at this point.
Completely agreed. And it's also on paper an exciting match.
Yep.
You know? So it fulfills that requirement. It's another win for Sheamus on his way to the Rumble programs and the Mania programs. And, you know, it should be a good match.
And maybe we'll even get like a Claymore on Almas, which would be a fun visual.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah. You'd have to jump really high. Charlie is about to interview. Yeah, I don't think they'll ever do that match. Charlie's about to interview Miz and Morrison. She says their plans to cause a rift between Sheamus and Drew have backfired. And Charlie asks Miz Morrison if they have a backup plan. Miz ends up stalling for answers, while Morrison says he's got a new idea, and so they leave. We hear from Reckoning, Mia Yim and Ali. They say that Retribution don't play games. They annihilate games. Is that what they said?
I believe, yeah. We don't play games, we annihilate them, which, what does that even mean?
They just take your Monopoly board and rip it.
Yeah. We're going to rip up all of your Uno cards.
Oh, I was going to say Uno. They're going to take one of the 8s out of the Uno. Do they have 8s in Uno? I don't even know.
Yeah, there are 8s. So, like, I think it's 1 to 9 in Uno. And then, of course, you got your skips, your reverses, your draw 2s, your draw 4s, your wild cards. Wait, I don't even know, because I played Monopoly over Thanksgiving with my nieces.
Taking a wild card out of your Uno deck I would definitely say would be annihilating your Uno deck.
Like, they've got this version of Uno now, which I don't really agree with, but I played it with my nieces anyway, where you can make your own rules.
What?
And like, there's blank wild cards, and you can write in your own rules. Like, instead of draw 4, like draw 10 or skip the next 2 turns. Like, you can make up your own rules, which feels like that Uno is destroying and annihilating their own game by in introducing that card into the deck.
Can you write anything, like even outside of the game? Can I write like, you must, do my laundry for a month?
I'm sure, depending on the crowd, this could get really risky because, like, you could write, like, take a shot or, go hang out with Matt Riddle and his pets. Like, there's so many. This could get bad really quick, Uno.
Wow, I didn't know it was that risky. Dana versus Reckoning. Ali is ringside. And so early on, Reckoning goes for this big boot in the corner. And her mask just falls off. So for the rest of this match, it's suddenly Dana Brooke versus Mia Yim. We had like this must have been taped, some other time.
Well, here's my question, Wade, before we get to the finish. Like, they called her Reckoning on the show, but maybe I missed it over the past month or so. But has she ever been identified as Mia Yim?
She has not. None of the Retribution members have ever been called like their previous names. But I think, especially with Mia Yim, it's incredibly obvious. I mean, it's pretty obvious with like T-Bar as well. They make reference to their NXT runs. So they are supposed to be the same characters.
Yeah, because when her mask falls off, like, they're still like just Reckoning's going for this. And I'm like, do you not see what I see, Samoa Joe? Like, that's Mia Yim.
The mask is a state of mind. So Ali is trying to distract Dana on the apron. Meanwhile, Yim goes for another big boot. And Dana dodges and then schoolboys her for the victory. So those big boots were really not working very well for Mia Yim in this match. I will say, Nate, to their credit, I thought proceeding without fumbling at all after the mask falling off and just wrestling the match as normal, like, was a real kind of like, I would say a showcase of how they're able to kind of hold their composure on live TV. And I thought they actually did pretty well. Yim continues to, maybe even a Retribution more so, wrestling a very aggressive style of pace. Dana looked really good and precise, I would say, as well. So what little bad could be spoken of this match was pretty much out of their control, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I love Mia Yim. Like, I think Mia Yim has been great for a long time. Like, even going back to like the stuff on the Indies or when she was in Impact as part of the Dollhouse. Like, Mia Yim's been good for a long time. This gimmick, though, is not good for anybody involved, I don't think, except like maybe Ali. But even then, Ali kind of comes across at the end of this way looking kind of goofy. But yeah, like the fact that Dana Brooke, of all people, is coming out as this big heroic babyface, like I don't know what I'm watching anymore, Wei Ting.
They're pushing Dana, but yeah.
I will say the one good thing about Dana Brooke, like besides the fact that she got the win, like I like the new outfit because she's from Cleveland and the outfit was like Cleveland Cavaliers colors, and so like I'm always a big fan of people like wearing the colors of their hometown team because it makes them feel more special. Other than Nate Robinson, who wore those Knicks colors to the ring and got ethered. So other than Nate, and we want to send our thoughts and prayers out to Nate Robinson. But other than that, like, I love the look of, like, it's like when John Cena used to wear, like, Celtics colors or Red Sox colors. Like, I like that idea.
Well, he would wear the colors of every team. Like, depending on where he showed up. He wore, like, Leafs colors one time in Toronto. So he's a
fickle fan.
Pretty much.
He's like Drake. He just cheers for whoever's winning at the time.
I know. What did you think of? Did you watch Jones and Tyson over the weekend?
I caught clips of it. Like, I love Roy Jones Jr. I think Roy Jones Jr. is an underrated fighter. And Mike Tyson, obviously, was the heavyweight boxer of my youth. But yeah, like my nieces were in town. It's like I'm not gonna pay this money and subject these poor children to watching Tyson Jones and also Nate Robinson versus Jake Paul.
If they don't respect your Twitter, Karen, I don't think they'll respect the legacy of Mike Tyson. No. Unfortunately,
I think Snoop said it best. He's like, these look like some uncles out here fighting at a barbecue.
Which I would watch. I would gladly watch. Unfortunately, I didn't get a chance to check it out either on Saturday. But I had no idea that Mauro Ranallo was calling the show with Snoop Dogg, which is like crazy. To me, amazing, and something I'm sure was a career highlight for Morrow.
Yeah.
Getting to call a Tyson match with Snoop Dogg, like holy shit. So
I think Snoop came out maybe the best of anybody from the show, because that's all I heard was like, yeah, Snoop Dogg needs to do more boxing commentary.
He needs to do more commentary, period. Like he was on Twitch for a little bit, not playing games, but just talking through games. And it's the most entertaining thing in the world. So yeah, he like WWE would. They would. Vince would probably be coaching him though.
I'm trying to think. I think it's UFC 4. He's on one of the modes on like knockout mode on UFC 4, and I played it because I had the free trial a few months ago, and I'm playing it, and all of a sudden, like I get the knockout, and Snoop's like, "Oh, I hope that brother had his plate ready because you just gave him a 2-piece and a biscuit." And I'm like, you know what? I'm here for this, EA Sports.
There should be an unlockable mode or downloadable every year. So we got Miz and Morrison take with AJ and Almost. They're in the back. Miz and Morrison bring a peach pie for AJ because, of course, he's from Georgia. AJ says, "Cut the crap. I know exactly why you're here." And without them even asking, AJ agrees to help tonight. He explains that it's because it would be way easier to beat The Miz for the title than Drew McIntyre. AJ says, "Leave the pie." And Almost says, "That's not a pie. That's a cupcake."
Now, this segment actually worked for me, Way. Like, I thought not only did you have the logic of these heels working together and AJ saying, like, yeah, I want you to win the title because it's easier to beat you than to beat this big heavyweight Drew McIntyre that's been on this tear lately. And even Morrison agreeing with AJ in that statement. And then the bit at the end with the AJ's like, "Oh, this is a good pie," and Almost like, "No, that's a cupcake." Like that's a dad joke, but it worked at the end of the segment.
I thought it was pretty funny. They're allowing Almost to speak a bit now, and they're giving him a comedic personality, which I think is a good choice for, especially with AJ, who I think is doing some of the most funniest work in the company right now. And the logic makes sense here. AJ is a cowardly heel, puts Drew over as so much of a threat that he's willing to, help the Miz here, so it works for me. MVP teases Matt Riddle in the back about losing his triple threat match. Riddle says losing sucks, but at least I had an opportunity, unlike Lashley. Riddle then continues to pitch MVP on his new business ideas, including Lawn Bros Landscaping and Bro Nuts. MVP has had enough of these jokes. He says his ideas are ridiculous, and he's glad Riddle lost. Then he pie faces him, not with the peach pie. Lashley comes in and lays him out with the Hurt Lock, and we get a new program here: Riddle versus Lashley coming up.
So wait, like, did I miss something? Because didn't last week wasn't MVP going to say like weren't they going to have this big segment in the ring where he pitched them these ideas, or was that did I miss something?
I think that was in the back. I don't think they ever went out to the ring to pitch any ideas.
Okay, yeah, because I thought last week, because when he brought up the Brogert, MVP was like, get your business plan together, and then we'll be in the ring next week for you to tell us these ideas. But we just did it in the back.
Oh, okay, yeah. So you're hoping for a big Matt Riddle business presentation on this show?
Yeah, I thought like that actually could have been, instead of all these minor segments with Riddle, if you focus on just one segment with Riddle and the Hurt Business, I think MVP in particular could have guided Matt to a really good segment that gets you to the same conclusion where we set up Lashley versus Riddle. It could have been Shark Tank, like instead of Mark Cuban and Mr. Wonderful and all those people, you'll have like the Hurt Business just waiting for Matt Riddle's pitches.
Like, who's the one who's got the money here? Who's making these investments? I mean, it's the Hurt. Is it the Hurt Business? Or are they is like MVP just a portfolio manager? We won't know this until Linda McMahon shows up to help this struggling small business. But I think like this, like granted, Wade, at the end of the day, it doesn't mean anything because we got to where we needed to get to. But I do think you could have actually crafted a fun segment around this logic of Matt Riddle trying to pitch ideas to MVP. I will say, like, from, like seeing the month and a half or 2 months or 3 months of Matt Riddle's appearances on Raw now, he continues to be a big presence on this show. They're giving him a lot of screen time, a lot of speaking roles. So I think they've done a good job of showcasing this new character over the past few weeks. And I have to imagine Vince McMahon loves him a lot because here's a character. Remember Dean Ambrose and like the gas mask and like all the shit that he wanted Dean Ambrose to do that Moxley ended up saying he would never do it. Matt Riddle is the type of character that'll probably say anything. Like you can get him talking about Brogurt. You could get him talking about like what the fuck was he talking about earlier? Hoppy and Skipper, bunnies. Any fucking crazy idea that Vince or whoever has, this character could probably get away with.
Now we're just like when we get to the heel turn, like again, I'm hoping we get like the Vince Russo Matt Riddle, like, listen, bro.
There it is.
I got Hoppy over here. I fed him some bro nuts. But again, Way, like as much as this segment was kind of a nothing segment, I am looking forward to seeing what Riddle and Lashley can do in the ring because I think you can kind of tap into both of their MMA experience and put together a fun little match.
Definitely. So we get Sheamus and Keith Lee backstage. Keith Lee walks up and says, some of the fellas think that Sheamus intends on turning on Drew. Sheamus says it's none of your business. So keeping the idea that Sheamus might still turn on Drew alive.
So, and here was my question with this little bit, Way. Like, what is Keith Lee's angle here? Because we did the story, I want to say 2 months ago, when Keith and Drew are supposed to be friends, and then it turned heated and they started fighting each other. So is Keith Lee looking out for Drew, or is he looking out for Keith Lee in this situation?
Oh, you never really know, right? I think since they're both baby faces, I would assume that Lee and McIntyre are still friends and that this was simply Keith Lee looking out for Drew McIntyre because here's a heel suddenly entering their social circle. Who's this guy suddenly, in the group chat? Like, we never welcomed you. Like, you're in the heel group chat.
And everybody's just, all the baby faces are muting Sheamus. Like, they don't want to hear from him.
Multiple side chats going on without Sheamus right now. So that's what I take it. I mean, but of course the possibility is always there for Keith Lee to turn heel or anybody else turning heel. But I like the fact that you have still a bit of drama here attached to Sheamus. Charlie is with Drew McIntyre in ring for a big interview. He's got his big sword and a big kilt, I guess. He says it feels good to stand here to be WWE champ, but sometimes he needs to feel what it's like to get knocked down. He promised that he would beat Roman Reigns up, and he did. He saw in their match the confidence in Roman Reigns' eyes turn to confusion. He went from giving spears to showing fear. And then Jey Uso had to come in and screw everything up. He says Roman might have won their battle at Survivor Series, but he'll win the war. So they're continuing to keep those flames alive for a potential rematch. When do you think we might revisit this program?
That's interesting because I guess like maybe some of it depends on where we are in 2021 with the state of the pandemic and the vaccine and all that way. Because I think like the ultimate end game of the Roman Reigns story is like, if you can find a way, I know the brother said he's retired, Way, but if you can find a way to involve DJ in this story, then I think that's where you go. But if that's not on the table, then maybe they run Drew and Roman back at Mania.
Yeah, I really think that's the biggest match you can do other than The Rock. But the other question is whether or not you want to save that for a live crowd. Is that a match that's big enough for, or I mean, I would say do it anyway. They'll probably revisit it and do it again in the future if they continue to, be the franchise players on the show. And you don't know, especially with Roman Reigns, like you don't know if he's like how long if he'll be available like all the time, especially in the middle of a pandemic. So I think they should probably go this direction. And it almost looks like that they're planning on it right now by continuing to, keep this whole thing alive. And
there's ways to get there even if Drew drops the title. I think it's better if Drew drops the title, in fact, because, then he can go through the Rumble and win the Rumble in back-to-back years and say, I'm going over to SmackDown to face Roman.
The other factor, of course, is Big E, because, I mean, I believe that he will be in the title hunt come WrestleMania.
He should be.
Yeah, it just feels like they're kind of pacing him for that direction, even though it's a pretty slow pace at the moment. So, we shall see a lot of elements in play. So we got in our main event. Wait a second here. Okay, so yeah, Drew. Drew continues to speak. He says he's got no beef with AJ. He thinks their match will be great, but he threatens the Miz that he'll fold John Morrison up inside the briefcase and then he'll shove it up his asshole. So there's that.
Which is very, very descriptive, Drew.
Oh, very, very. So we got in our main event, Drew McIntyre and Sheamus.
Like we've got homicide and maybe sodomy in one fell swoop.
Everything you'd want in a 3-hour
in a family-friendly wrestling show.
Of course. Main event time. Drew McIntyre and Sheamus taking on Miz and Morrison with AJ Styles on commentary. Morrison is just bumping all over the place for Sheamus and McIntyre. Sheamus attacks both Miz and Morrison with the beats of the Bowery. The babyfaces are just destroying them. And then we come back from a commercial break as Miz and Morrison are in total control now. Sheamus is playing a full-on babyface in peril here. Gets the hot tag to Drew McIntyre. McIntyre is about to claymore the Miz, but Sheamus asks for the hot tag to finish up the match. Before he can, Sheamus drops down from the apron. But we cut to another camera angle and we learn he drops down from the apron because it's John Morrison who has taken him away. What did you think about that spot?
I actually thought that was really clever way. And I don't know if we've seen the spot where somebody pulls somebody off the apron before to prevent the tag, but they've never framed it like, is Sheamus turning on Drew? But no, it turns out he was actually pulled off by the heel. So I thought that was a really kind of clever way to play that situation.
I thought so too. Like, it was one of those things where it was like, man, is this on the same show as like Hoppy the Bunny? Like,
yes.
Like, am I giving them too much credit? And was this just like, a coincidence that this happened? But I think we should give them credit because I think this Sheamus thing has actually been really good with Drew McIntyre, and it wouldn't it seems to be the story. Is he or is he not a bad guy? So a spot like this I thought was absolutely perfect. So here comes AJ. He hits the forearm and he DQs the match. I guess he just, because I guess from his logic, he just wants Sheamus to be, or McIntyre to be laid out so that Miz can cash in. So with Drew out, AJ tries to get Miz to cash in on the briefcase. Miz says, I can't do it. AJ tells Morrison to hit his finish, and man, did he hit his finish. He hits the Starship Pain, which looked like it made complete contact with Morrison's knee and Drew's poor arm. And then the skull-crushing finale on Drew McIntyre almost grabs the briefcase to give to AJ, and AJ is basically trying to cash in for the Miz before the Miz realizes, what am I listening to you for? Drew is out, and so the Miz actually considers it now. He hands the briefcase to the referee, but before the referee can actually ring the bell, Drew gets back up, lays out both Miz and Morrison. Drew then stares AJ down, but almost rescues him, and he rescues him in like the coolest way possible. AJ does like a backflip over the rope right onto almost his shoulders. And AJ, to end the show, is just hilarious. He's acting as if almost is holding him back, rescuing Drew from AJ's beating. Really funny stuff from AJ, and that's how we end the show.
Yeah, like I thought that, as much as, I didn't see the first hour wait, but as much as the second hour kind of dragged for me, I thought once we get to the triple threat on, like Dana Brooke aside with the Retribution match, like everything in this third hour was pretty solid, which is kind of goes against the grain of what we're usually used to on these 3-hour Raws. Like I thought the triple threat was good. And then this main event, again, you're making Drew look strong. You're making AJ looks smart as the dastardly heel. Sheamus looks strong here for the most part. And I love we had the Kevin Costner, Whitney Houston bodyguard moment at the end with Almost and AJ. And I've always thought that AJ was a better talker than people gave him credit for, but particularly in this latest heel run, you get to see all of the kind of cocky, smarmy, cowardly heel mannerisms that AJ can bring to the table.
It surprises me how funny he is, because it's definitely a far cry from Claire Lynch AJ Styles.
Ooh.
Man. Which was great for several different reasons. And Anyway, but I agree with you. Third hour was actually quite good. And I think much of that is because they did a really good job here, I think, with building up AJ Styles and Drew McIntyre in one episode. They did a good job of keeping The Miz in play. I really kind of like the heels kind of like, planning to work together to get him to, cash in. And then you had the really funny scene at the end of AJ trying to make Miz cash in. Like the heel dynamics involved here, I thought were quite clever. Involving what was it, Sheamus too. I think they're doing a good job, like keeping that afloat here. So a lot of interesting, like, I don't know. I would say Adams floating around like the Drew McIntyre, and I think a lot of it is in good shape. So that's probably why I enjoyed the third hour.
Yeah, like the main event scene seems really strong right now. Like I've got issues with some of the undercard stuff, but again, like I think everything involving Drew and the title was pretty solid this week. And like I just love the idea that even in defeat, AJ can still claim like, hey, like I set the guy up. Like you had the win, Miz, but you hesitated. And so again, going back to Hamilton, because I'm trying to get the post wrestling on that Hamilton bump right now, Wade, because I've seen how effective it is. Like AJ Styles was Alexander Hamilton right now. Like he wanted Miz to take that shot, but Miz was like Aaron Burr, and he was like, wait for it.
Wonderful. Wow. So, who's Drew McIntyre? Or
Drew McIntyre is George Washington because he's leading the show right now.
Got it. Wow, I feel like it's a whole podcast on its own, like wrestling and Hamilton analogies. That's
maybe that'll be the next challenge for you and Andrew. Like draft wrestlers into your play of Hamilton.
I think that's a niche all to your own. I think you've already got that covered, Nate. We can't do anything possibly like that without you. So
Xavier Woods starring as Thomas Jefferson, like that's pitch perfect casting.
If I knew my American history better, I would absolutely laugh. But I don't, so I'll just chuckle. Hey, we don't have that much feedback, so maybe that'll tell you something about tonight's viewership of Raw. But let's read what we can here. So out of 10 in the forum, what did you guys think of tonight's Raw? 5 out of 10, a perfect 5.
That's what I would have given it to, Way. Like it wasn't a great show, but the things that they really needed to get over, I think they got over, particularly in that third hour.
We start with Paul from New Jersey, who says, this Elias Hardy feud broke 1,000 guitars and didn't draw a single dime. Tom Phillips said the Symphony of Destruction match would be like no other match we've seen unless you watch the Symphony of Destruction match on the February 21st edition of SmackDown. I feel like we get an Austin Powers joke at least once a month on WWE television. I bet you that's the last comedy Vince McMahon saw. Your impression of Vince doing Austin Powers is like going to stay with me for a long time. That's an all-timer.
It's groovy, baby. It's groovy.
Dana Brooke recorded her first singles pinfall victory since September 8th, 2019 when she defeated Sarah Logan in the 100 Years' War. I'm happy AJ was victorious, but the show was a dumpster fire. Had to check out before the main event. Apparently, the final script was handed in 25 minutes before the show. If that's the case, it really showed tonight. 2 Money in the Branks out of 10. Do you think Morrison cares about his terrible booking since returning, or at this point in his career, do you think the paycheck solves that problem?
I mean, like, yeah, the paycheck always makes things a little bit easier way, particularly, like, if you look at Morrison right now, like, he is in a position where he's working with the guy that, like, they've had good chemistry in the past. I'm sure there's a friendship there with him and The Miz. And like he's not at the top of the card, but he's main event adjacent, in this current storyline. So yeah, if I'm Morrison, I'm happy picking up that check, particularly in the middle of a pandemic where like there's no guarantee if he were on the independents or maybe in another company that he'd be able to make that money right now.
The money is good, like the visibility is good, like he could be doing a lot worse. He could be on a 205 Live or a 24/7 title chase, which, I mean, I guess we should revisit
He could be in Retribution.
Oh my goodness. What would he be? Hoppy, Springs,
yes.
Trampoline. No, that's no good. Yeah, man. I don't know. It's like, I think when Morrison was announced to come back, I don't think any of us envisioned that he would be just, sort of the fall guy for The Miz, the comedy guy, sort of like the jester in the team. But at the same time, it's like, man, that's the game in this company, right? You do what you're told, and if you do it with a straight face, and if you do a good job of it, do it. If you take that bump off of that clothesline in a nice enough way, maybe at some point they'll throw you a bone. That's the hope, at least. I can't really tell you what he's thinking, but I can tell you from watching the performance, it does not at all look like he's not motivated. Like, he feels like he's like giving it his all, like doing whatever.
Yeah, and I think, like, realistically, like, yes, we loved Morrison's run in Impact and even in, like, Lucha Underground to a certain extent. But I think if I'm John Morrison, I'm looking at this realistically way. Like, I've already been in this company before. I know walking back in, I'm not going to be at the top of the mountain. Like, even with somebody like Drew McIntyre, who Vince loves. Like, it took Drew a while when he returned from Impact to get to where he is now. So, like, yeah, like, just collect that check, make other people look good, and who knows, maybe a year from now, something else opens up.
Do you want me to read our final piece of feedback here?
I will continue the tradition we started last week, Way, and allow you to read the final piece of feedback.
Oh, I thank you. We go to Johnny, who says, so the most dastardly thing Sheamus can do to Drew McIntyre right now is to be the reason why Drew no longer has the championship, which presumably would mean that The Miz would be the beneficiary of that angle. So my question is, for you two gentlemen, is what direction do you think we are heading in between now and WrestleMania? Do you think Miz holds it for a bit and Drew wins it back again, or is Miz walking into WrestleMania with the championship? There is a 10-year-old redemption story here that the WWE can play on, with The Miz in 2011 being the afterthought. Whether the audience would be interested in that or not, I don't know.
So we talked about it a little bit, Way, in respect to Roman and Drew. Like, if you can't get The Rock, if The Rock is too busy, doing a movie or running the XFL, or maybe doing a surprise appearance on the Rocky Maivia Picture Show, like if that was to happen in 2021, who knows? Anything can happen, Wai Ting. But if you can't get DJ, then I think the two matches I would have for WrestleMania would be Drew versus Roman as your main event, and then maybe it's Miz or maybe it's AJ, but either way, I'd have Big E challenging for the other title.
Yeah. It's hard for me to see The Miz heading to WrestleMania as champion. And quite frankly, it's actually difficult for me to see The Miz as champion at all. Like, he is just such a comedy character. And again, he's better than Otis in this position, but he's also the type of character who can afford a loss of a Money in the Bank title and doesn't really hurt him. I'll argue him winning the title won't really help him all that much either. He's just kind of pigeonholed at this point in that level where he's largely a comedy guy, but he could be serious when he has bursts of seriousness when you want that from him.
I think the only advantage to Miz, Way, is if you want to protect Drew in a loss.
If you want to protect Drew in a loss, what do you mean?
In that, it wouldn't be a clean loss if Miz cashes in the Money in the Bank, and that way you can have Drew without the title maybe go face Roman. Like, if that's your end game, that's the only way I see the Miz cash in working, because you're right. Like, nobody really wants to see a Miz title run.
Yeah, so I mean that would work perfectly fine, and then it's hard for me to see the Miz versus somebody like, oh man, like your next level guy on Raw, like at WrestleMania. So it might be a case where I would probably take the belt off of the Miz right away at the February show or something.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's interesting. It continues to be, an interesting piece in play that we don't fully know the answers to.
I would love I know it wouldn't be for a long time probably, but I would love if instead of going back to Orton or even somebody like Keith Lee or Riddle, who I think will be champions down the road, but not right now. Like, if it went to AJ and we did find a way to get to AJ versus Big E, I think that'd be a fun matchup.
It would be, actually. That'd be great. So I think that wraps it up, Nate. Overall, a 2 hour 45 minutes of Raw 1 hour 45 minute Raw that was, in your opinion, pretty good.
Yeah, I would say there's 80 to 90 minutes of a really strong show over this 3 hour period away. and I think that's Raw in a nutshell. There are some good elements week to week, but overall the show is just really long. So I'm glad that I could, at least provide John a bit of a break for these past couple of weeks and spare him these 3 hours.
Well, that is the big question. How much of Raw will you be watching going forward?
Oh, I think I'll return back to my normal Raw viewing habits way, which consists of flipping between the channels during Monday Night Football and the Rachel Maddow show, and watching Twitter and reading the reviews online and seeing what segments I need to go back and watch.
Seems like a good way to experience, I would say, the show, like interspersed with political commentary. So, I definitely hope to be able to catch up with you very soon, Nate, about your thoughts on current main roster WWE. But for people who want to follow perhaps some of these brilliant, world attention-grabbing tweets of yours, where can they find that?
Yes, you can follow me on Twitter at @8 MOZAIK at Nate Mosaic, and you can join the ranks of the Hamill fans out there. Once the Hamilton official page retweeted me, I feel like I'm being exposed to a whole new audience way. And then speaking of Hamilton, like if you want to hear more from me, you can check out the Kings of Sport Patreon, patreon.com/the Kings of Sport, with Marcus Vanderberg and myself, where our most recent upload is our very first movie live watch, where I was joined by Brittany Monet and Vanessa Shark from the Black Lightning podcast, and we watched Hamilton, and we, basically it's 3 hours way of us singing along to the musical and making jokes about fashion back then and getting into some political commentary and basically just, having fun watching Hamilton. It's available both on the Patreon for $5, but also we put it out on the free feed on Thanksgiving. So, you can check that out. And if you like what you hear, consider dropping that $5. We're not even going to get you for that whole Hamilton way. We're not even taking that whole 10. Just half a ham can get you, half a ham can get you on the Kings of Sport Patreon. The other things I got going, again, like Rocky Maivia Picture Show right here on Post Wrestling. We're back in January with Fast and Furious 7. So that'll be a fun show to kick off 2021 with. I'm on the main event over at Place to Be Nation. I've got the Black Lightning podcast over at DCTV Podcasts. There's a bunch of stuff. Like I'm doing voiceovers now. So if you like this voice and you'd like to have it on your brand or use it for your nonprofit or whatever, you can hit me up on Twitter and we can talk about that. So in the number 8, MOZAIK is where you can find me. And with that way, I think I'm gonna go back to napping now.
Well, first I want to say you can really impress Nate's niece by following him not just on Twitter but also on Instagram. And where can people find that? That's
right. I need to get these IG numbers up, fam. So yeah, you can check me out on the gram at Black Nate BLAQUE _ in the number 8, because I wanted to make it as difficult as possible for people to find me on Instagram. So Black Nate on Instagram is where you can find me. And so like I go through spells of posting on Instagram way. I'm kind of like Liv Morgan's push. Like it'll be really hot for a couple days and then I won't post anything for a month. Like I noticed today, like I posted a couple things over this Thanksgiving week and I hadn't posted since Chadwick Boseman passed, and that was months ago. And so it's like, oh yeah, like I'm kind of sporadic, hit or miss on Instagram, but when I do post I always have something good for the people.
I've really started to post a lot more on Instagram, but not like with actual posts, but I've been storying a bit more often. I think you would love stories, especially like the music function. Like people who follow the Post Wrestling account, always, like if you have your sound on, you might know how annoying I am with like putting music on all of our posts. But it's the most fun thing. It's like, me like being able to like play I have a jukebox of like the world's songs that I could play like 10-second clips of. I think you would love it.
I'll have to check that out. Oh, I just remembered, you started talking about music and my mind immediately, because we are in the season, went to Mariah Carey, because it's like Mariah Carey season of these damn Christmas songs. But I'm going to be doing something on the Patreon starting, I want to say, December 13th, 12th or the 13th. And it's going to be called the 12 Casts of Christmas. And basically what that's going to be, the 12 Casts of Christmas.
Okay.
The 12 Cats of Christmas, that's a Natalia thing. I can't step on her gimmick. But yeah, I'm going to pick my favorite 12 shows from 2020, and we're going to post that every day, leading up to Christmas. on the Patreon. So it'll be like shows where Wade's been on, shows where John's been on, shows with me and Marcus, shows with, a bunch of my friends in the podcast community. So like, I still don't know what my top 12 shows are at this moment, but that'll be out on the Patreon later this month. The 12 Casts of Christmas. 12
Casts of Christmas. So go and check it out. We have the Kings of Sport Patreon linked into the show description. So you just click on that to find that. And since it's that season, maybe Nate, you can say hi to our mutual friend Braxton Witherspoon at some point for these next.
Yeah, I haven't heard from Braxton and the Smart Marks for a while. I think what happened, Wade, they were doing a tour in Tokyo, and once the pandemic popped off, they had to stay overseas. So hopefully we will hear from them in this holiday season.
I can only hope. So that wraps it up, everybody. This show is nearing 2 hours, and we know how people could be critical of these shows being a little too long. So maybe we should wrap it up right about now. We will, first of all, you can listen to John Pollock return with Dave Meltzer tomorrow on the free feed. So download that. And then I'll be back with Bruce Lord on Wednesday for Rewind to Dynamite, Moxley versus Omega. Nate, last word goes to you.
Oh, well, thank you for having me as always, Wade. It's always fun. Looking forward to the return of the King, John Pollock. And I'll just leave everybody out there with this. If you're going to, I started thinking about Hoppy. Like, there's a lot going through my mind, Wade, bro nuts. Like, this show took a lot out of me. But I will say, and Wade said it before, naps are your friend. So if you can get a nap in sometime this week, do it.